The boy, Ning Yuan, wakes up with a bad headache in a prison cell. Not aware of what is going on, suddenly he hears the girl in the next cell talking to him. He soon realized that a spiked door was slowly inching towards him every second. To escape the girl, Su Jin tried to pass an axe through a hole in the wall so that the boy could break the window of his cell. But they later realized that it wouldn't fit. Time was running out. Finally, he thought of a way to escape. Minding after his instructions, the girl broke the leg of her prison bed and passed it through the hole. As time ticked away, the boy escaped through the window, promising to return and save the girl. However, moments later, the boy still hadn't come to rescue her. She teared up and remembered when her team abandoned her in the mountains. The spiked wall was now very close to her, and she had lost all hope. But soon later, the boy broke the wooden roof of her cell and pulled her out. They jumped off the roof and landed on the ground, but realized that they were on top of a lighthouse. Luckily, next to them was a hatch and a ladder which led to the bottom. After working together to open the hatch, Ning Yuan first climbed down, followed by Su Jin. Halfway through, however, he realized the middle part of the ladder was missing. They jumped the gap and reached the bottom part of the ladder. Suddenly, the ladder snapped off from the lighthouse wall, and they both fell into the sea. Yuan had positioned himself at the bottom during the fall to protect her, but as a result, he lost consciousness. She carried him to an abandoned house on the island. Out of nowhere, she hears a man behind her. Sujin, carrying the boy, is brought into the house. The mysterious man interrogated her and threatened to kill her if she did not comply. The girl told the man that Ning Yuan needed to be treated as he was in a coma. The man then shifted to the boy who was still unconscious. To wake him up, the man stepped on Sujin's hand and he got up, startled. However, the boy lost all of the memories he had made after the 5th grade due to the fall and now believed and acted like a 5th grader. The girl explained that he had lost his memories because he protected her during the fall, but the man needed a better explanation as to why the boy would protect a person he barely knew. After her explanation, the man put his knife away and they began investigating the corpse that was in the room. They cut the shirt on the corpse and discovered the number 0834 on its body, but none of them could figure out what it meant and gave up. The mysterious man introduced himself as Ziyang and mentioned that he was from a gang in Hong Kong. Later, they found a piece of paper inside the corpse's ears which showed the map of the island they were on. At night, Ziyang was outside smoking while the two were inside sleeping. He wondered if they were the underlings of his enemy. In the morning, when they were walking in the forest, they found a man-made trap. Sujin and Ning Yuan were ordered to find food and water and were told that they would only get half of Ziyang's portion. They hesitantly agreed to follow his orders as they knew they couldn't beat Ziyang. Soon later, after they had eaten, Ziyang told Sujin to go into the cave together with him and instructed Ning Yuan to not go in under any circumstances. Ziyang then proceeded to sexually assault Sujin. But when Ning Yuan realizes, he runs into the cave trying to stop the man. In return, the man punches Ning Yuan to the ground. But he manages to provide a childish explanation as to why they should work as a team. Ning Yuan gets hit by the man again, but the man walks out of the cage and leaves them alone. Suddenly, Ziyang heard someone yell and dashed to the cave to check on them. But the yells were coming from somewhere near the trap. They hid behind a bush and saw a man running away from something. Not seeing the trap, he fell into it, and a savage indigenous man killed the man, dragging him away. The group could do nothing but watch. The next morning, Su Jin and Ning Yuan were picking coconuts from a tree when Su Jin screamed. Ziyang rushes to them only to find out that it is just a mouse. In the next scene, Su Jin is peeing in the forest, but she suddenly feels a presence watching her. She screamed as the rest rushed towards her, but during that time, she was already being captured by savages. Ning Yuan, who had just arrived at the scene, realizing what was happening, charged towards the savages to save Su Jin. But all of a sudden, one of the savages was shot in the head. The other savage ran away soon after. Later, a lady, introducing herself as a police officer called Tracy Candy, showed up. She wanted to bring them to her teammates. Ziyuan asked if she had ever been to Hong Kong as he was sure that he had seen her before, but she just dismissed the question. Soon later, more savages came with bows and arrows, and the team had to quickly run away with Tracy staying behind to stall the savages. The three soon stopped at a nearby river to get some water, and Zhishai reminded them to not tell anyone about the intel that they had gathered. He offered them protection if they obeyed everything he said, and they agreed to take up his offer. After reuniting with Tracy, they were brought to Tracy's teammates. One was a basketball player, another was an actor, and one was named Kawa Ishigaki, who was a president of a big company in Japan called Ishigaki Group. Tracy then told the group about an architectural structure she saw, and Ishigaki suggested exploring it immediately. As Romeo, the actor, was reluctant to go through with that plan, they decided to do a vote. Even though there was an odd number of people, Soo-jin had waived making the vote a draw. Because of this, Ishigaki said that he would give everyone who voted to explore a large sum of money when they get back to the real world, but Zaekuan offered an even larger sum of money. In the next scene, we can see the group outside the structure, implying that Ishigaki had agreed to pay a larger sum of money for anyone who voted to explore. Later, Ishigaki identified the structure to likely be a Mayan building, suggesting that there were, perhaps, in South America. Tracy then found burn marks on the ground and thought that it was caused by the savages, but Ning Yuan soon found batteries and mentioned that it was probably humans, as savages couldn't have possibly used batteries. Next, the group split into two teams, one to go into the cave for exploration, and the second team to stay put outside. Ishigaki, Soo-jin, and the basketball player went into the cave. Meanwhile, Romeo attempted to conspire to rig the voting system with Zae-yeon so that they could get more money from Ishigaki. But Chi-yuan declined and held a knife to his neck, threatening Romeo. A flashback starts, showing Ning Yuan and Soo-jin. Soo-jin told Ning Yuan that venom had gone into Zae-yuan's ear when he tried to sexually assault her. She had already provided him with the cure, but Jo-yuan didn't know that he would still feel a lot of pain during the curing process. Shortly after, the scene cuts back to Zae-yuan feeling pain in his stomach. Ning Yuan realized at that moment that a large group of savages were charging towards them. Romeo and Ning Yuan fled, but Jae-yuan, feeling intense pain, could not move. When Ning Yuan saw this, he quickly ran to Zae-yeon to help him get away. At the same time, Romeo had already reached the inside of the structure and pulled a lever to close the gate. Ning Yuan and Zae-yuan realized this and walked as fast as they could towards the structure. They slid under the gate just in time for it to close. The team exploring the structure rushed back towards them. Unfortunately, Ning Yuan had been scraped by a poisonous arrow when he was running. Soo-jin said that he only had 10 hours to live if they didn't find a cure. Zae-yuan, now feeling indebted to Ning Yuan, panicked to open the gate, but it didn't open. Unexpectedly, Ning Yuan was still calm. They quickly decided to find a way out of the structure to get the cure. As they walked, they soon arrived in a moist underground system, leading to a pool of water underneath. Suddenly, they heard a scream and discovered a group of survivors who were stranded in the middle of the pool of water. Among the survivors was a professor who was able to read the ancient words and understand the language of the savages, but he was now unconscious. Swiftly, Zae-yuan threw a rope towards them and pulled the survivors out. They introduced themselves as Andre, a Russian mercenary, Ding Hechun, and Rika Cherry. The professor soon gains consciousness and informs the rest of the group that the exit will appear after reaching the top of the stone pillar. As the water spouted out the inlets in intervals, the group waited for the water level to rise and climbed up the pillars. Rika had just reached the top pillar. She looked back and investigated the mysterious door, spotting a hand scanner on the wall. As she put her hand on the scanner, the door turned and trapped her inside. When the professor reaches the top, he reads a phrase that had been engraved on the wall, saying, "Among those who get here, only one of the warriors sacrifices himself." They now realized that the exit was on another platform which had already been flooded, so they decided to wait for the water to be drained out so that they could reach the exit. But the problem was that it would create a large vortex. They jumped in at the water, and as soon as the drainage system activated, swam onto the platform. However, Ding had drowned under the water, starting a flashback. This motivated him to keep pushing, and eventually, he reached the real platform. In the next scene, the group was walking through a tunnel when they discovered a dead snakeskin on the ground, which had been there for hundreds of years. They thought it to be the skin of a naga, but the professor told them that it was just normal snakeskin, At this point, Ning Yuan was too weak to walk and had to be carried. They reach a big room. In front of them was a closed gate and a platform for humans to lie on. The professor then read that someone had to be sacrificed for the gate to be opened. Thus, the group made a vote and voted for Romeo to be sacrificed. He didn't want to do it. So Ji Yuan punched the living shit out of him. So outside, each person in the group was given roles and Ning Yuan was given the cure. However, when Zi Yuan was walking through the forest, he encountered a giant snake which caused him to fall off the cliff. Luckily, there was a lake beneath. Zhai Yuan found the basketball player also in the lake. The rest of the group rushed down to them and were relieved after seeing that they were fine. Suddenly, a spear darted towards them. The savages were now surrounding them. Somehow, the savages spoke human language and asked the professor about a one-eyed man who could speak the savages' language. They told the savages that it was his mentor, who had already been dead for a long time. The group was brought to the savages' base, where they were asked to cure the illness of the village elder. As the professor didn't have any medical knowledge, he asked Su Jin to follow. By the way, Su Jin is a medical college student, I forgot to mention. Anyways, Su Jin then diagnosed it as malaria and was permitted to find the cure outside. If the team didn't come back by sunrise the next morning, the rest of the hostages would be killed. At night, the scene cuts to a flashback where the professor is in his mentor's house. His mentor had given his dog a serum which revived him from the dead. 2 years later, he died of a heart attack, and the agreement that he signed allowed his body to be taken away by a company. Back to Su Jin's team, which was finding the cure, they suddenly encountered zombie monkeys. Luckily, they fended it off and the next morning returned safely right before the hostages were executed. The scene then cuts back to a huge mansion where a white-haired man is betting on their survival. He said that he would bet on their survival as long as Ning Yuan was there. In the corner of the room, the one-eyed mentor was also betting. Back in the forest, the savages were having a celebration. Ji Yuan was walking down the stairs when he saw zombie monkeys feasting on one of the savages. Soon, a group of savages came to the scene. One of the savage warriors went to cut off the limbs of the bitten savage so that he could not escape from the coffin when he turned into a zombie. The next morning was the enthronement of the new savage chief. Even though the group planned to leave earlier, they were held back. The tradition was for the new chief to drink the blood of the former chief. But what he didn't know was that there was organ blood of the zombie smudged on the bowl. He soon turned into a zombie and the group fled away. So the group split up in the forest and Ning Yuan, the professor and Ding were now together. They heard Su Jin running near them and hid behind a bush to see what was happening. 2 savages were chasing after her, but fortunately, they let her go because she had saved the former village elder. At night, they ended up on a beach and took a break. The tide had risen and they realized that there were crocodiles near them. Ding left them behind and ran away by himself, but when he was walking in the forest, he saw Zi Yuan, then told him that he only ran so that he could get a rope and save Ning Yuan and the professor. Suddenly, a group of zombie monkeys surrounded them, and Ji Yuan had to stay behind and fight the monkeys while Ding went back to the beach. Ning Yuan and the professor tied the rope to the trees and began climbing the rope. However, because the rope was very flexible and had already drooped very low, Ning Yuan had to do some acrobatics. Soon, Zai Yuan came back, but he had already been bitten by a zombie monkey. He agreed to follow them, but stayed far behind when walking. They finally reached a swamp and tried to cross it, but as soon as the group stepped in, they started sinking. They laid down to increase their surface area, but Ding somehow still managed to sink. He held on to Ning Yuan's leg, stopping him from moving, so Ning Yuan got ready to kick him. However, he had a flashback and his voice suddenly changed. He told Ding that he would come back for Ding. Ning Yuan reached flat ground and grabbed a vine. He threw the vine to Zai Yuan, who had just arrived, and as Zeta Yuan was being pulled, he grabbed Ding together with him. In the next scene, a flashback is shown where Tracy is ambushing a harbor used to do trading. A speedboat with 2 men who looked like Andre was speeding towards Tracy, and Tracy shot one of the men. Back in the forest, Tracy is told to be careful around Andre. The scene cuts to Su Jin, Tracy, Ishigaki, Andre and the basketball player walking near a volcano when suddenly, Ishigaki goes missing. The group was extremely hungry and dehydrated, and as they were walking to find Ishigaki, Soo-jin had sunken into quicksand. Andre and Tracy jumped in to save Soo-jin, but they ended up in an underground location where they soon found the basketball player and Ishigaki, who was now unconscious. Later, when the professor, Ding In-yuan and Zai-yuan are at the bottom of a waterfall, they discover that the professor is experiencing similar symptoms to malaria which the savages had caught before. After this, they kept walking and eventually found a cave. Ning-yuan and Ding went inside while the professor and Zai-yuan stayed outside. To underground, Andre and Tracy found a man-made tunnel resembling a part of a research facility. After going separate ways with Andre to discover more of the hallways, Tracy reached a power station. Suddenly, the door closed by itself, and as Tracy was running to the other exit, a mysterious man was controlling one of the cranes, trying to drop a metal container on Tracy. Tracy thought that it was Andre and began trying to shoot him as the mysterious man ran out of the exit. Andre coincidentally arrived at the entrance. Tracy shot him thinking that he was trying to kill her, and they began fighting. Ning-yuan then threatened to drop the food into a giant fan if they didn't stop, so they finally stopped. Later, Ning-yuan's group met back up with Soo-jin and the rest, and he asked Soo-jin to check on the professor and Zai-yuan. However, when they reached the outside of the cave, Zai-yuan and the professor were both gone. They then saw a knife which was stuck into the cave wall, but Ning-yuan said it was too high for it to have been placed by Zai-yuan. They went back into the cave and Ishigaki woke up. All of them went back into the research facility and discovered a room with many computers. The team split up once again, and Soo-jin, Tracy and Ding went into a room which had zombie monkeys inside tubes filled with some weird liquid. Ishigaki stayed back in the computer room and tried to unlock the master computer, but realized that it needed a long password. Andre, Ning-yuan, and the basketball player then found the belongings of a U.S. soldier. They then went into a restaurant with many skeletons, and inside was another door. Andre opened the door and saw someone on a couch. The guy was already dead, but somehow he looked alive. He was the manager of the facility. Andre grabbed the notebook inside his shirt pocket and opened it. All of a sudden, Andre hears something outside the room and runs out, leaving the notebook behind. In-yuan flipped through all of the pages and noticed the sentence, "Judgment is coming, soon salvation lies within," on the last page of the book. The scene then cuts to Soo-jin, Tracy, and Ding walking when a grenade is thrown in front of them. Luckily, Tracy notices it and asks them to lie down. They ran and hid under a staircase, realizing that someone was trying to kill them. They planned to rush towards a door, and Ding volunteered to be the first person, rushing despite that being the most dangerous. They sprinted and Ding got shot in the ear. But Tracy and Soo-jin went inside the room while Ding held the door open. When it was his turn to go into the room, he suddenly couldn't move and he was left behind. Soo-jin and Tracy ended up in a room where poisonous gas started filling up the room. The mysterious man opened the door to see them lying on the floor. Later, Ning-yuan and the basketball player ran back to the computer room, where Ishigaki told them they needed to solve the admin password. Ishigaki typed in the words that Ning-yuan found in the book, and it worked. But there was still a second level of authorization, which needed a handprint, and there were only 10 minutes before it self-destructed. Everyone panicked except for Ning-yuan. Suddenly, he calmed everyone down and told the basketball player to chop the manager's hand, and the basketball player rushed back to the room they were in before. But as soon as he saw the manager's eyes, he had a panic attack. Ning-yuan shouted through the speaker to encourage him. In the next scene, we can see him carrying the manager's whole body. He arrived at the computer room and placed his hand on the scanner with a fraction of a second left on the clock.